Meeting. This is January 22nd, 2026. I'm going to take roll, please.
Chair Rectal,
Here.
Councilmember Burt,
Here.
Councilmember Lithcott-Hames.
Here.
You don't look too chipper.
I'm not.
Thank you for attending. 3 is always better than 2. Okay. First item is public comment on anything that.
Chair, actually, I think Julie needs to make an announcement.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I am invoking the just clause provision of AB 2449 because I am not feeling well. And I'm at my house, 4135 Maybell Way, and occasionally there may be another adult over the age of 18 who is in the room with me. That would be my partner, Dan Lithcott-Hames.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so first is public comment on any item that is not on the agenda, but is under the purview of the retail.
We do have one request to speak. Our first speaker will be Deb G. And you can take a seat up here, please. And let me just pull up your presentation.
Thank you. So I do a lot of volunteer work on Cal Ave, and I've talked to, am I talked to a lot of the business owners, and the condition of retail has been a concern of mine, and I for a long time, and I have noticed a few things that could, and they've shared their concerns with me over the years, and I've noticed a few things that could be done really quickly and easily and would improve things on Cal Ave, and a couple things that should be attended to that would improve things for the retail people. Next slide. So these are bike racks that are set up for the car street. They could just be put instead of in series like that, they could be put in parallel right where the cars go, like they have in Country Sun. That would clear up the sidewalk. This is fast, easy, I don't think, and it can be undone in a jiffy. Next slide. This pedestal can be just taken out. This is a gathering place, a community gathering place, and that pedestal is just in the way all the time. It could be put back if you want another pedestal. Next slide. Just to try to make the businesses mind their P's and Q's. These sidewalks are used a lot by people who, they're just, as you can see, they're traversed by people who use the sidewalks for walking more than they do the street, and it's full of obstacles. Next slide. And then there are some restaurants that are obstructing retail. This is the only one I took a picture of. I was standing there and this woman was like, "Where is Palo Alto iWorks?" Well, we were standing in front of Palo Alto iWorks and you can't see it because La Bodeguita has pushed like halfway into their front space, and they've done that on the other side too, where you can see as you're walking down the street, you can't see the barbershop. So that's something that could be attended to. Next slide. Oh, that's it. Okay, then the other thing I've done is looked at space that restaurants are taking up relative to their square, relative to how much store frontage they actually have. And I'm going to go through it really quickly because this is interesting. I made a ratio. La Bodeguita, 15. Square Pie, 16. Joni's, 19. Jincho, 21. Teirun, 21. Cali, 25. Son of Wolf, 32. Palo Alto Sol, 33. Zurine's, 48. So as you can see, Zurine's, relative to the space it has as retail, takes up 3 times as much space on the street as La Bodeguita. Are they, and I think they are only charged still 15% of the market rate. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm hoping the city's gonna look at this again because, you look at that street and you go, oh, it's Zurine's street. This is an imposition on the rest of the on the rest of the retail. And I'm sorry this is so rushed. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. That concludes general public comment.
Okay, thank you. We'll move.
Chair, if I might just start us off on this meeting with a couple just housekeeping items. So first, Good afternoon or good morning to the committee. Kylie Nozay, Assistant City Manager. I would like to introduce to the committee members you have met, but also the community, our new Economic Development Manager and Assistant to the City Manager, Alex Andrade. Alex has been with us for a short, maybe month or so, but comes to us with decades of experience in economic development in the Bay Area as well as in Southern California. So everything from redevelopment agencies, working neighboring cities, and most recently from the city of Milpitas. So we are thrilled to have him with us. He's already hit the ground running, and so we'll make sure we continue to integrate him into the business community and meet the various stakeholders, but wanted to introduce the committee to the new face.
Yeah, thank you.
On that, the other administrative thing is I just want to recognize that we do have a pretty sizable agenda today. The first three items for the committee members are time sensitive. Those are items, and I can give a little bit more on the next steps of them as we move through them, are a little bit more they're in a part of a process, and the feedback from the committee will help inform those next steps. So that's the time sensitivity associated with it. The fourth item is an information only item. So depending on how we're able to move through the agenda and time allowances, that could be taken as simply information for the committee's awareness.
Okay, very good.
Chair, I do have a hard stop at 11:30.
Okay. That is good. Okay. So our first action item will be retail revitalization. And this is near and dear to my heart. I worked on this on PTC, and so I'm really eager to get these changes in. Alex will be, or is Jennifer going to?
So Alex will introduce PDS, but ultimately, I think Alex has a little bit of scene setting on this item on where we are in the process.
Good morning, Alex Andrade, Economic Development Manager. Pleasure to be here. So for this first agenda item, this is considering and providing feedback on the retail revitalization measures and initiatives related to the city's economic development and retail vibrancy priority. So staff is here today to provide an update on that and perhaps a consideration on a future ordinance. And this is in regards to the fact that in October 2025, Planning and Transportation Commission meeting, PDS executives were there to present. And so that's the gist of today's presentation. I'm going to hand it off to staff.
Good morning, Jennifer Armour, Assistant Director for Planning and Development Services. And in the effort for this retail revitalization ordinance, implementation of the interim ordinance that was adopted a year ago, we have support from Jean Eisberg, who's actually online, joining us online. She's with Lexington Planning. You've seen her work on a number of different important code update efforts that we've been moving forward over the last few years. And so she has made a presentation to the Planning and Transportation Commission on this effort and is prepared to share with you where we are on that and the feedback that we got from that initial meeting. In addition, we also have the Planning and Transportation Commission Chair, Alan Aiken, here to join to share respond to any questions or share any thoughts from that discussion as well as our second item today. So with that, I will hand it off to Jean Eisberg.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, council members. Again, my name is Jean Eisberg with Lexington Planning. I'm joined by a colleague, Christine Furstenberg, who I'll introduce in just a minute, and she will be available for Q&A. Next slide, please. So this work is building off of analysis that was done over the last few years. You may recall seeing a couple of reports prepared that provided background analysis data about the current state of retail in Palo Alto and which suggested zoning amendments. The Planning and Transportation Commission spent several meetings looking at that data, thinking about potential amendments, but ultimately it was this subcommittee and the council who adopted an interim ordinance to put into effect some initial zoning changes. That ordinance sunsets in December of this year, so either needs to be made permanent or it will be rescinded. Next slide, please. So this effort, and today what we want to talk about is some of the key zoning issues that emanated both from that report and our continued work over the last couple of years. We'll talk about the feedback we received from the PTC, summarize the direction that we're going in terms of this ordinance based on the PTC's feedback, and then we're looking to get your feedback as we prepare that draft ordinance. Next slide, please. So the key issues, the zoning ordinance with respect to retail is very complicated. There's places where it's redundant, there's places where it's inconsistent. It's overall, there's a lot you have to look at to understand what applies to different districts. And in some cases, it's very restrictive in terms of uses and in terms of the size of uses. Next slide, please. So a few recommendations that the PTC supported. First, in terms of use regulations, they supported expanding different types of uses across different districts. So for example, right now in certain districts, takeout restaurants are not permitted. Now, of course, takeout quick serve has become more and more common and most restaurants provide it. And so we want to acknowledge that in the code. Another example, animal care is a very prevalent use that we see now, and distinguishing between the different types of uses, pet grooming being a less impactful use, overnight boarding potentially being a more impactful use. Other ideas including fitness and exercise studios, also a very common use these days. Several districts restrict the size of those uses, and so looking at increasing those size limitations. And then lastly, this idea that many retail spaces are quite deep. And although it may be important to have retail fronting the street where you can look into the window and have that experience as a pedestrian, the back half of the space could be used for other purposes. And the PTC supported this idea of allowing small office in the back of a space that could be fronting a side street or in the interior space. And particularly the idea of prioritizing neighborhood serving office uses, which is already defined in the code. Next slide, please. So another example, and this is particular to the Midtown and Charleston shopping centers, there's 3 different use tables that apply to this district, and it's only once you get to the GF ground floor zoning district, you learn that that one supersedes the other 2. And so, I do zoning for a living, and it's very complicated to me, but you can imagine for a retailer who's trying to figure out where they can locate their space, it's very confusing for them to figure out if their use can be located in a district. And so the PTC supported streamlining this, one set of uses that applies to these specific districts. Next slide, please. In terms of parking, one of the key issues identified was that right now, when there's a change of use within an existing structure, it can trigger a higher parking requirement, even if it's not physically feasible to add parking to the site. We suggested a number of different ways that we could regulate parking. The PTC supported some of them, including making adjustments to commercial parking ratios, and again, removing this use concept of takeout restaurants, and so eliminating that parking requirement that goes with it as a couple examples. Next slide, please. In terms of the retail preservation ordinance, we looked at, okay, where does that retail preservation ordinance apply? Could we consider limiting its applicability only to certain locations? Right now it applies to, for example, the research park zone, the GM zones along San Antonio and elsewhere. And so the PTC supported potentially limiting that, but wanted to see some additional analysis. Next slide, please.
One question about that.
Yes.
So I was looking at the map there. Where in GM do we have, I don't see any yellow on GM. Can you point out the spots where we have RPO and GM?
Can you back up one slide, please? It should be showing up along Bayshore, but this is a good observation. It's not my cursor, but the upper right corner, you can kind of see in that East Meadow circle area, it should be showing up there and along Bayshore Freeway. I don't think I can annotate on this. But you're right, it should be showing up on this map and it's not.
Okay.
On the top right.
Okay, but your point is that there are some spots around the city that are GM that RPO applies to, but limited number.
Well, so when we actually look at the data, and we've just been doing this last couple weeks, so it's not in your report. But although the retail preservation ordinance, as it's written, ostensibly could apply to an RM district, a GM district, because it's not specific to doesn't say, oh, this only applies to certain districts. If there was a retail use on those sites, and there are a number of retail uses, kind of more wholesale retail uses along that Bayshore area that are GM zoned. If a redevelopment project were to go in those locations, those retail uses would need to be replaced generally on a one-to-one basis.
Okay, so is this map complete or is this missing some yellow?
I think it's missing at least those GM sites. So we would need to correct that along, like I'm not seeing them showing up along Bayshore and East Meadow Circle.
Okay, and one thing that came up during PTC was whether Loma Verde and Middlefield, the old Phil spot, whether that's covered by RPO. Do you know, right now, there's no yellow on the map. Do you know if that's the case?
I would need to drill down to that. I'm not seeing
Okay.
it right here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. Almost done here. So this is a summary of where we're headed in terms of the draft ordinance based on where the feedback that we've gotten from the PTC. So this includes revising definitions, which the interim ordinance does. I mentioned streamlining use regulations across commercial districts, including the Midtown and Charleston shopping centers, looking at changes to parking, as well as to process administration. The retail preservation ordinance, I mentioned we're doing some more analysis that's in progress now. And I think, as you pointed out, we have a little bit more to do. And then lastly, in terms of planned community districts, allowing more discretion for the director to make certain interpretations for similar uses. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, what we're looking here today is to get your feedback on some of these options and recommendations so we can prepare an ordinance for the PTC and ultimately the full council to consider. Next slide. So my last slide here is just to introduce my colleague, Christine Furstenberg. Whereas I focus on zoning, Christine lives, eats, sleeps, breathes retail. So she is a retail broker and also consults for cities. And so she is helping us to prepare this ordinance and work with the Planning Commission. So she's here available for Q&A. Thank you.
So Chair, I think we'll turn it back to you for public comment and the committee's deliberation, but I'd like to just reiterate one of Jean's final points, which is this item was discussed by PTC. The next step is for staff to actually draft an ordinance. So as you're thinking about your feedback is going to go towards how staff craft that actual ordinance that will be then brought forward to PTC for their review. So really think outside of perhaps just your individual lenses, but also what your colleagues on council may appreciate or see in this, as this is really going to inform that drafting process. And so we want to make sure that we're on the right track in that next step before we lose time or have to redraft things, frankly.
Okay, that's good guidance. Okay, I think we'll start with if either Pat or Julie have questions, general questions, then we'll go to public comment. And then I think we can go to the staff report and just go through each item individually and have discussions about each one instead of going serially. So, Julie, did you have any questions? Overall questions?
No, thank you.
Okay.
One was in the, I don't know if it would fall under the use regulations, but there has been some discussion about allowing existing retail to be split into smaller retail, not the reduction in back-end space, which is a different issue, I think. Was that discussed, and where does that stand?
I'll give a start, and then Jean, if you'd like to add anything, but that's not something that would be prohibited under our current regulations. We don't have minimum size for retail spaces. So if there was an existing business that was 3,000 square feet, and the property owner wanted to split that into two retail spaces, a 1,000 square foot and a 2,000 square foot. I don't believe there's any regulations now that would prevent
I
that.
don't know where, but I had been under the understanding that there were barriers to that. So,
If I may interject briefly, Alan Aiken, current PTC chair. I think one of the concerns was requirements for access on the primary frontage. So as long as we deal with the possibility of subdividing spaces that don't have access to the primary frontage, then that should help take care of that concern.
so would that mean that if you had a 3,000 square foot space and you divided it to two 1,500s, you could have one shared access? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
And in addition to that, one of the provisions that we are considering for this ordinance is that if you had a really deep retail space with a small frontage on the primary street, that if that was divided, then maybe it would be okay to allow the back half to be a different use, maybe an office or something, if it has access off a
That's a
side
different
street.
subject.
Right.
I would just note that we went through this about 10 years ago in the downtown area as we were really having just a huge demand for space in general there, both office and retail. And one of the things was that we had actually, historically, we have retail, and we as customers go in and think that's the retail establishment. But there's office and there's inventory and all this other space that's necessary to run a retail. And what was happening was they were converting what had been historically basements for inventory into Class A office. In some circumstances, that might have been okay. And then we had a discussion on this very topic about the back end space. And one of the concerns we had was that if you allow that to be converted to office, then the necessary office space and inventory space for a retailer then has to come out of the current shop floor space, and you actually shrink the functioning retail space. So it's not, and at least the thinking we had at the time was that it's not so simple of, oh, that's not retail space, because we're thinking of retail as where customers are participating. So that's, I just want to put that out on the table at this time. Oh, and on this sorry, on the splitting of it, if that 3,000 square foot space was split into two, we wouldn't prohibit another door being added. Is that right? Okay. Great. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so let's move on to public comment.
We do have one request to speak. Our first speaker is Alex G.
Oh, yep, push the button. The
red button. My competitor. So Alex Giovanotto from Vittoria Management. And I wanted to say, I read through the entire report, and I think there's a lot of really smart stuff, very helpful stuff in there. And well thought out. I mean, very smart. Like even the part about the administrative name rather than the conditional use permit, you'd be surprised. That's a big deal. There are many, especially retailers we'd want, that are very cautious about going to a public forum and possibly being rejected for reputational purposes. I've personally been through that with folks. What I'd like to put out here for consideration is just has to do with the external messaging. I think it's internally good that we're saying things like revitalization, because I think it spurs action. But as a person who tours space, it's not great messaging. So for example, we did the emergency interim ordinance. I like to refer to the parts of that, but I'm a little afraid that they'll actually read it because the intro is things are terrible. We have a lot of vacancy. This matters. So I'm afraid to show it to them. So also the word interim, I mean, it can take us 3 months, 6 months, 1 year to negotiate a lease. If they think that at some point it's pulled out from under them, that's not a good situation for us either. So, and then one more point, I've still got a minute, great. One more point is that I have a hard time convincing folks of the reality, which is things have changed here. I mean, just this committee, these ideas, things have changed in Palo Alto, but I have a hard time convincing people of that. And what I'm hoping for, we just have an idea somehow to signal a break point from how it used to be to how it already is, but is getting better. So just, throwing this out here, but if there was even a sign in City Hall that said, welcome retail, we love retail, contact your retail ambassador, I could just say, hey, things have changed. Go over to City Hall. First thing you see is we love retail. That will mean something, and it's, very, very practical to do. So those are some ideas I'd just like to introduce into the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment on item 1. Oh. Sorry, I didn't see him. Actually, we do have one more public comment. Our next speaker is John S.
Thank you. Yes, John Shank with Thwaites Brothers. Good morning. I think, let me just reiterate what Alex was saying. I feel that as somebody also who tours retailers, tours buildings, meets with existing retailers, there's a sense of we're in flux. We haven't made decisions. We're considering. This is interim. We're not there yet. So where you all are today, I want to just add gas to the fire. Let's make decisions. Let's implement, change the code, be done. We can disagree, as we all would in a big room, around some of the details on which definition, what square footage of fitness can be on University Avenue without a 4,000, 5,000, 7,000. I don't know. I have an opinion, but let's just make a decision and move on. These are all very good things, as Alex has said. I think the other thing that comes up around touring and such is parking. Retailers love parking. They need parking. They want to know, where do people park, where the garage is, what's the access, what are the deals, what do permits cost, all those kinds of things. And in conjunction with the first speaker's commentary on Cal Ave and some of the impacts of restaurant parklets to neighboring retailers, it's a very real issue. I'm not here to say, as I have before, let's not allow parklets in front of neighbors. I still think we shouldn't, but that's not the rule. But if it's to be, maybe there should be, but there's not in the reality of budgets and such. We're not going to have the code enforcement or the vehicles to enforce the city's policy. And so all of a sudden, the chairs are out, the things happen, and it's up to the neighboring retailer to fight with a neighbor or call us, and it's not right. So having the policy for good reasons leads to unintentional negative consequences, which isn't wonderful. So I'd either change it or we have to figure out how to police it better. And the last thing, just as Councilmember Burt was mentioning, and I don't remember all the details. I do remember the conversations of 10 or I don't know, might have been 100 years ago in my mind around the retail and splitting. And a separate issue is the back half converting to office or some other non-retail use. Some of the realities, at least on University Avenue, are that if the retail space, we have a lot of deep, 25 feet wide, 100-foot deep spaces. And very few retailers today have lots of on-site inventory or even offices. Offices are, everything's on an iPad somewhere or something. They want smaller spaces. The idea of
Your
sharing
time is up,
entries,
sir.
there's just not a reality there. That's really some dead space in the downtown. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. That concludes public comment on item 1.
Okay, thank you. Okay, unless there's any questions or comments from either Pat or Julie, we'll move on. Can you pull up the staff report to packet page 15? And it lists a series of issues. And some of these issues are thumbs up, thumbs down, and sometimes that you have multiple choice question here. And so we want to poll the council members so we can give guidance to staff. So when they get the ordinance, it reflects our thoughts and not, we don't have to any churn. Okay, so the first one is talking about animal care. And the first suggestion is splitting it to distinguish between pet-related and pet-related uses and also boarding. But also then we have some other issues about what limits you would have on that, and particularly how much waste is generated by the use. And then also one option would be to try to find some performance standards for the waste and have that govern the regulation. So Pat, did you have any thoughts about what combinations of these?
Not in the details, just the conceptual. I think it is difference. We went through this with the Midi-Cat town. Trying to understand the difference between where something falls. Is it grooming? Is it boarding? Is it not boarding, but they're selling pets? And so just moving to the clarifications, I think, is really important, but I'm interested in hearing your thoughts.
And can staff talk about the second bullet in that? So the first one makes sense to me, is that we have two different uses. One is mini cat town, one is a boarding. What would we envision for these requirements? Levels of noise or waste? How would we make it more explicit in the zoning code?
Jennifer, do you want me to address that?
Yes, I'd invite you to go ahead.
So when these uses have been approved in the past, there's typically a set of conditions of approval. And so right now, those are conditions on the conditional use permit, and instead we would try to incorporate those as objective standards into the code itself.
And so what kind of objective standards would you have?
The noise issue is a little bit more simple in terms of looking back at the city's noise ordinance. It's managing times of day that a business is open, managing odors, making sure you have, waste receptacles, but basically translating the conditions the city already has into standards.
Okay. And I don't know how those standards would be written. Because right now, if any business is creating odors or noise, there's limits to that. Right? And so would this just be extending or making more explicit what the current regulation is, or would we be having new regulations?
I think we would look at what the existing regulations are and whether it covers it, since this is a particular concern for this type of use and the reason that it's required a conditional use permit in the past. We wanted to make sure that we were fully covered there for the concerns from the past.
Okay. Yeah, so for me, I think the first bullet is very sensible. I think the second or third one is just making sure that the first one is well written. So to me, this is not a big decision. Julie, do you have any comments?
I don't, Keith. I'll let you know. I'm doing my best to be here and be present. I'm definitely listening. I'm gonna kind of I'll pop up if I have something to say that hasn't been said.
Okay, yeah, just feel free to pop in. No need to raise your
Thank you.
hand.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Just a follow-up, out of the potential modifications. The second option is what I would be inclined to support. The first one really doesn't address the problem that we recently had. And so I think it's important that we move in the direction of the second.
And so what's the distinction between the first bullet and the second bullet? The first,
Part of the second bullet is that with zoning, you kind of have a choice whether to keep your definition more general and anticipate that we don't know the types of businesses that might come up in a few years. We didn't anticipate cat cafes potentially. And so rather identifying cat cafe as a use within animal care as a daytime use, we wouldn't want to be so specific. So rather, this is a question of you have a cat cafe. Is it a cafe serving coffee that happens to have cats? Or is it, and we've seen this elsewhere, is it a pet boarding that happens to have a coffee bar in it? And so that's where it's just the nuance becomes important about what those levels of impacts are, but we don't always want to prescribe it in the definition in the ordinance.
okay. Yeah, then I agree. I think the second bullet is the better or the best option.
And then there's the added question of whether performance standards should be there. So are we saying cats aren't too loud? Certain dogs are. Rhesus monkeys are real bad. So I'm not sure. In that sense, we might need performance standards. I don't know if the staff has any thoughts on that final and/or there.
Well, I think that's exactly right. So if the monkey situation comes up, it's a whole different noise issue. And so you do want to allow some room for interpretation that it gets put in a different category than the less impactful use. And so I think depending on which way we go, if we just have this animal use daytime versus nighttime, and we have a set of basic standards, and we still have a conditional use permit for the more impactful category, then that allows us to apply a set of standards based on that specific use as a conditional use permit.
So I'm trying to think of what these performance standards would be like. How would we really draw the line through that?
So, for example, if we're yeah, I would need to take a closer look at some of the standards that the city has been currently applying to some of these more impactful uses. But if we're concerned about odors and waste, it's about making sure that the receptacles are such that they're contained, they're taken out on a regular basis. And that may be more conditions that are applied to a conditional use permit because it gets very specific rather than in the code.
If I may also add, there also is some control when we're dealing with a business that has animals in it through our animal control staff. And so there are some components of this that would actually be handled through the work with them and the permits that they issue. And so I think what we are hearing is a desire to move towards something that keeps the process simple, but makes it clear that they are expected to comply with our noise and odor, restrictions that are in the code, and that if they don't, then that can cause problems. I think we just want to make it really clear in allowing these uses that there is a sensitivity to that, so that there is an opportunity for us to adjust the business when needed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Retail financial services. This would be a new definition, or it's in the interim ordinance, which is a retail-like application. Any comments bad about that? Do you want to make that permanent, or do you want to shape it at all?
You're asking for our comments? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the struggle that we've had for a long while is in financial services where we ended up getting companies that are really private financial consulting using retail space. They're not banking-like and walk-in types. And the question has always been, how do we make those distinctions? And I don't know whether we feel that, and I don't know if that planning commission went into this. Do we currently, does the interim ordinance make the distinctions well enough?
Answering from the PTC's point of view, yes, we thought the definition was sufficient, but we were looking for ways to promote neighborhood serving businesses to the extent that was possible within the code.
Yeah. When I look at this, I do think it could be more explicit about having walk-in, open to the public as opposed to private consulting.
And even window treatments have been one of the issues where they'll have these so-called financial service companies, the blinds are down. It doesn't contribute to the retail vibrancy of the street. It may be great income for the landlord because they have ground floor that suddenly is very high-end tenants. But from the standpoint of retail vibrancy, that's one thing that I don't know what's in our code and whether it's just an issue of enforcement in occasions where we've had blocked out so-called financial services. Does anyone know how that issue is treated?
Unfortunately, I don't. It's been a few years since I worked at the development center, but our director Late is here to provide extra support.
Jonathan Lee, Director for Planning and Development Services. Yes, we have had that challenge. I think the way the city has addressed that in the past is we have overlays in the areas of our core retail areas, the ground floor overlay. And so those are the areas where we have those limitations on how much window coverage there can be. We don't have them on the other areas where we might also see retail. And so that's how that plays out.
And two follow-up questions. One, do we enforce it in the core retail areas well enough? I mean, do we have circumstances where we have, non-transparent windows where we intend to not have it? And then second, in those other areas, should we extend this requirement to have, if we're allowing the financial services, it really needs to continue to have that open appearance and feel?
Yeah. So on the first question, if our staff is made aware of it, we will follow up on that. And just council, of course, is aware that we have a lot of complaints that come in and the resource challenges that we have. But for certainly any egregious issues, we can prioritize that and take care of that. On the second point, just noting that, I mean, part of what we're trying to accomplish here is create more flexibility and so that these uses can come in and be easily established. So just the more regulations and controls we put onto it, more of a challenge that becomes. With respect to your question specifically about financial services, I believe we could probably make a link to other provisions. We typically have in our use chapter other regulations, and we could put like a note that says for financial institutions, shall comply with the, transparency standards set forth in this other section. If that were a specific concern for the committee, we can find a way to address that.
Well, I'd be curious what my colleagues think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think we want to be micromanaging here, but we also want to encourage them to make it look and feel like a retail space as opposed to just a brick wall with people behind it.
I'll just say we call it retail like, and if it's not like retail, it's not retail like.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one then. which is automobile showroom. This would not be an automobile dealership where you'd have a large number of vehicles, but a showroom where it'd be more retail-like. Any thoughts, Pat?
I think it's a good contemporary evolution and I'll just for the record note that about 5 years before Tesla put theirs in at Stanford Shopping Center, I suggested to them that they think that way, and they said, "Oh no, that's crazy." So things evolve.
You should have patented it, yes. Okay, so I agree. I think it's a good thing. It's evolving. Like 10 years ago, we didn't have that, and I think that's a good addition. Okay, next is fast casual. We want to be able to have takeout. Also, so currently the ordinance has this requirement for a full commercial kitchen and commercial dishwasher, and that is no longer going to be a requirement, right? Does the interim ordinance have this? So where's the strikeout? Is the ordinance, the interim ordinance right now, have this strikeout or not?
I'll
It does-
invite, yeah, Ms. Eisenberg.
It does not. And so this strikeout was an idea that we put forward. The PTC did not, they basically asked us to think a little bit more about intended consequences of this. So we had suggested maybe removing it, acknowledging that quick serve is so prevalent now. So at this point, no, this is not as shown. This is a potential modification, not what's shown in the interim ordinance.
Do other cities have this requirement for commercial kitchen and dishwasher?
I'll start out, and I would say that many do in the instances where they're trying to distinguish between a bar and a restaurant. In our case, since we do not allow bar uses, it's less important because that's, we're not trying to define what is a restaurant versus a bar in terms of what might be used, allowed versus requiring a conditional use permit.
Okay, and the requirement of 50% of revenues must be derived from the sale of food. So if it has less than, let's say you have 45% food, 55% alcohol, what would that be considered then?
Not allowed.
Oh, not allowed.
If it is requiring that a minimum percentage, 50% of the revenues must be from eating and drinking, then that's the minimum that's required for that use.
Okay.
Since bars are not allowed, otherwise it would be considered a bar.
Interesting.
But bars are not allowed?
Correct.
So I'll note that the last time I recall this coming up was with Antonio's Nut House. When it was permitted in the 70s, it was a bar and a restaurant, and then it became a bar. And then they basically got called out on it, and then they brought in a taqueria within the Nut House. I can't imagine that they had 50% of their revenue from the taqueria. And I don't know, out of many of our establishments that have significant a bar component, and we often kind of think of them maybe more as that they're a beer place or whatever. I'd be really surprised if they have 50% of their revenue today from food. So I'm concerned that we've got something in the code that is both something we don't have compliance to, and we wouldn't necessarily want to go that far. I do think that there's the valid question of, do we allow pure bars? If we don't allow them to be purely bars, what should be that food component? But I don't know that the way we have it written reflects reality.
If I may make a suggestion in response to that comment, one option, since we are trying to provide a little more flexibility for the retail environment, would be to remove that particular specific provision of requiring the 50%, but still requiring food service to allow kind of that recognition that we don't want just alcohol bars, but that there should be food service.
Yes. So if we move in that direction, and say we don't want to allow pure bars, then we could just allow this very nominal food service that's just token and not really addressing whether it is a true combination of the two. So I don't think we should go, unless we want to make the decision to allow pure bars, I don't think we should go so far simply as to have that more general definition, because people are going to work around it. So I don't know the exact solution. I just want to frame the issue.
Sure, council members. I think this is a really good example of where your feedback and input is super helpful, and where hopefully we can focus our attention on this item moving forward. One, I think the question of yes bars, no bars is really important feedback for us, so that we can then go back. And then two, if let's just say the council and you believe your colleagues also would prefer to continue with no bars, but you want to be more lenient. I think if you simply provide that direction to staff, we have a lot of work to do to go actually draft the ordinance. We can go look at what options there are, and ultimately the final ordinance language is going to come back through you. So you will have another shot at it. The PTC, I think, is really just seeking this policy guidance.
And I'll offer an example that maybe is good to kind of look at what do we want. The varsity, when it became the what was the shared use space? What was it called?
The was it Blue?
Well, that's the coffee shop in there, but it was the SAP shared space.
Oh yeah,
On a house.
On a house.
on a house.
At a certain point in time, they looked to have a liquor license there, and we pushed back, and that was an area that had potential high evening activity, recessed from the main street, and I always thought that was a mistake. That we really don't have evening vitality. We have to, we try and balance having evening real vitality, including for younger people, with not having it be, a over the top scene in our downtown. So I think there are some changes that we should re-examine there. We don't want to go too far, but I think right now, first, the way the code's written, it's too far. And then second, are there circumstances where we might want to allow a bar where it's not street facing? I mean, we have another, I can think of another case of basically a beer bar in an alley that we have. And I don't know how that conforms. Maybe I've had a snack there, but so I think this deserves some additional consideration.
Julie has her hand raised here.
Yeah. Thank you. I just want to add, I was surprised when you said we don't allow bars. Councilmember Rechdal said we don't allow bars, and I had the same thought, because Bar Underdog at the corner of California Avenue and Birch, it looks like it's a bar with snacks. And it's quite popular, I'm told. Can't wait to get there myself one day, but I don't know how that managed to, sneak by, and I don't want it to go away, because I hear good things about it. Also, we've been discussing an entertainment zone as a potential for bringing more vitality to California Avenue. So I just want to be sure that everything is acting in concert. It seems strange that we would say, like, entertainment zone, you can have an open container for certain hours at certain times, and yet we're not allowing bars. So I concur with my colleagues that this one needs some work.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't understand how we have concerns that a bar would have rowdy patrons and have issues, but if we serve nachos, those issues go away. So I don't understand. So yes, I would encourage staff to try to relax that. I think that would be good for flexibility. Okay, so we can move on to the
One clarification from the committee members. I heard two versions of this: flexibility on the ratio of food versus bar type services versus pure bar type services. Does the committee have any consensus on whether or not we're open to pure bar type services?
Well, I am open to it,
Okay.
but it would
It opens a
be
whole new.
dependent on, how we
Sure.
would frame it.
Okay, so I think that's just helpful feedback. We may not come back with something, we may step our way through it, and giving us that flexibility.
And just one other way that we have placed guardrails in the past on something that we say, well, we want some of this, we just don't want it to go crazy. We've placed limits on the number of establishments in a district that would be a certain time, whether it's a gym or a bar or whatever. And so that might be one mechanism to place guardrails.
Okay. Julie, do you have any thoughts? What's your preference of, you good? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And the takeout to be able to be in any zoning district, I assume, you're good with takeout? Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Okay, and so the big thing here is the number K was added to the interim ordinance, and that allows the planning director to say, yes, this use looks and feels like retail like, and therefore we can put it in even though it's not in the list. So now the devils are in the details. We have some options on the right-hand side.
And it's just a reminder to the committee, I think the devil is in the details, but we're looking for general direction. Do you want to go further? Do you want to go more restrictive? Or are we on the right path? We don't have to necessarily wordsmith it today.
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion is I don't want to micromanage if we don't have to. And so I think the current is sufficient. I mean, Pat, some of your concerns about transparency and making sure that the retail looks like retail, that may be an issue here.
And that's the second or over on the right attempts to address that, right?
Yes.
This
would be the third bullet then.
And that would be additive to K as opposed to replacing it? Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, I would add more
Yes.
details to K.
Yeah, I'm inclined to have language along those lines within that second bullet.
It doesn't seem onerous. I can't see someone saying, oh, that's going to prevent me from opening, but it will ensure that it has a look and feel of retail.
Yeah, I mean, as we're opening up retail areas to other less purely retail functions, we don't want to lose the sense of it being a retail environment. And so my line earlier, if it's when we've used the term retail like, that was functionally retail like, but I also think we should think of it in terms of its look and feel is retail like.
Okay, then a separate issue is the final bullet is right now we have retail and you have retail like. And in most areas of the town, if you can do retail, you can do retail like. And I think University Avenue is the only spot, is that correct? That you cannot do retail like?
If I can clarify, the retail like use is really, that definition relates to the retail preservation ordinance. If you look at the use tables for each of the zoning districts, it doesn't say retail like use as a definition. It just lists a variety of uses that may fall under retail or retail like. So retail like use is really just about the retail preservation ordinance and what can replace existing uses.
But we also did understand that the intention was to broaden the types of uses that would be allowed in our retail zones. So I guess that's a point that if we could get confirmation on that was the intent of this expanded, definition.
So functionally, what would change if we merged retail and retail like?
PTC did talk about this at some length. The issue that we identified was that certain areas we'd like to have different behaviors. And one that was discussed in some detail was along El Camino, perhaps you don't want to have too many hotels because you break up the true retail areas with hotel fronts that are not conducive to pedestrian activity. So as a rule, we weren't willing to go so far as to merge retail and retail-like altogether. But if you were to go down that path, then you might want to consider whether area-specific requirements would have to be overlaid.
Yes, we're trying to simplify it, but I understand the thought process, because a hotel, even though it is retail-like, it can kind of block out retail, and because it can be a big long period where there's no retail except for maybe the hotel bar.
And we have a few examples of that in the nodes on El Camino. So the situation does exist.
If I just on that hotel topic, I recently raised the issue that when the increase in hotels that we've had over the last 15 years is because we upzoned hotels above what we allowed for zoning for office and retail and residential. And lo and behold, we got a wave of hotels that exceeded expectations and was extremely important for the city budget, for our capital improvement plan, and all those things. Today, with the way the state has superseded local zoning on residential to such a great degree, I don't anticipate we're going to get new hotel proposals, aside from the issue that the hotel market is pretty saturated regionally right now, and certainly not unless we increase the FAR for hotels to make it more competitive with other development. If we did that, which I think we probably want to, I don't know that it'll have the sort of effect that it did previously, just because the market demand may not recover for additional hotels for the foreseeable future. But if we did it, I think we would want to consider not doing that in the retail nodes, unless that hotel included true ground floor retail. And some hotels have street face ground floor retail. So that would be my thinking on allowing hotels in those retail areas, is that if we upzone for it, it would need to have true ground floor retail if it was in a retail node.
Okay. Julie, do you have your hand up? No. Okay. Oh, that's
No,
a
I
cursor.
don't. I was just scanning through the packet to see, because I can only see one slide at a time while I'm looking at Zoom, and just looking at our pace, I'm just a little worried about the balance between getting all this great detail out and just getting through. So I'm gonna speak up when I've got something that is of concern, but otherwise I'm just gonna.
The computer cursor was over your picture and it had a hand on it, and so it looked like you'd raised your hand. Okay, so I support the third bullet on this one, and I do not support merging them. I think I'd be open to adjustments of expanding retail. I mean, but I don't think that what's in retail now should never be changed. But at this point, I don't think we want to merge them. Okay, so let's go to the next.
And I just want to make sure that maybe this was clarified, that like University Avenue, we're not supporting retail like in a core retail zone like that. Is that correct?
Currently retail like it.
So retail like is defined in the code, but it's not a separate use in our land use tables.
So what does that mean in terms of, would we allow retail like on University?
I guess it depends on what type of retail like it is.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Ms. Eisberg if you've got any details on this specific question.
Yeah, I think the last statement's right. So it depends on what that retail-like use is, and is it personal service? Is it hotel? And that's where those are the actual uses that are listed in the use table. So again, retail like only comes up when you have a retail preservation ordinance situation and a retail or retail like use is being replaced.
Okay, so I guess either way, I have a concern that we make sure that a very core retail area, certain blocks, a university, remain as true retail as possible. That's not the case. A lot of most of the other areas in the city we're liberalizing, but that would be a concern. I just want to make sure that we are continuing to embrace that concept.
I would
And
concur.
so that's where looking at the GF combining district, which applies to University Avenue and a few other places, will be the place to hone in on.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think having the core and university, you want high pedestrian, and then as you go off to Hamilton Lytton, you can have lower, and then further out you can even less. But I don't think, for example, dentist office, I think having them near downtown is good for the retail, but I don't think we want a dentist office on university. So, okay, so let's go to the formula retail. And the interim did two things. It got rid of the requirement of formula retail on Cal Ave, but kept formula restaurants prohibited, but relaxed that. Now we can have 50, is it? Chains of 50 units or not. So I mean, my preference would be just to have the interim ordinance permanent. Pat, do you have on the upper right here,
And so, I'm sorry, the implication of the potential modification would be what?
could we have McDonald's on Cal Ave?
Oh, I see.
We allow the Gap now, but we don't allow McDonald's.
And how do we make that distinction right now?
It's if the chain has 50 or more.
Oh, I see.
So we want small chain, or we'll allow small chains, but we don't want large chains.
Yeah, I would be inclined to stay with where we are. Is that
Yeah.
was your proposal, right?
That's my preference.
Yeah, me too.
And add the second bullet. We want flexibility, and by relaxing last time, before it was a very small number. Was it like four units or something like that, or 8 units? But we relaxed that, and now you can have a significant chain that still goes there, but McDonald's would not be at least currently allowed. Okay.
We do have like a Subway, right? Interestingly, so it's grandfathered. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It may be that requires a conditional use permit if it is over the 50,
Or was it grandfathered?
or it may be
I
grandfathered.
think it might have been grandfathered. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it was grandfathered. Okay, so let's move on to the next one then, which is combining district regulations. Can staff give us an overview of the issues on this one?
Sure. So the middle column, so first, this R combining district only applies on California Avenue. The interim ordinance made the changes shown in underlined strikeout. So and the top half of this cell is what's allowed by right, and the bottom half is what it requires a conditional use permit. So the interim ordinance allowed more flexibility on personal services, added retail financial services, pet grooming, and automobile showroom, moved, for example, financial services from conditional use permit to by right. You can see here formula retail businesses on California are actually allowed with a conditional use permit. So that may be the Subway example. And so that's the way things are now.
I have a question on the fitness. It says exceeding 1,800 square feet. So anything above, it could be 20,000 square feet?
So
This is written?
yes, so under 1,800 square feet today is permitted by right, and over 1,800 square feet requires a conditional use permit. However, there are, yes, so that's right. So it could be larger. Now, there are also just limits on what a fitness provider is going to provide and on the space configurations in CalAV.
Yeah, but the question is, do we want to allow anything up to what a provider would choose to pursue and the opportunities there, or do we want to limit the size? And for that matter, this goes back to the question of how many of something is a good thing and when does it become a bad thing? And having some fitness on a retail street may be okay. But proliferation of it chokes off retail. And I don't think it really adds a great deal in terms of customers coming to the fitness studio that then support the retail. There's some of that, but I don't see it as really being a strong component. So I have apprehensions about having a proliferation of these on the main street, or in the case of Cal Ave, we even have a pedestrian-oriented area. There's the car-oriented. Just like on University, we have Lower University that is different in character than Upper University. Upper University, the pure retail area. Lower University goes into other transitions. On Cal Ave, we've created a circumstance where, partly reflecting the reality that was there, the closed street portion is more the pure retail, and the area between Birch and Park. But the buildings are different. The use has been different. There's been a lot of office there. It's different. And so I have a concern on over proliferation of fitness driving out retail, both of goods as well as food and beverage.
So the first bullet does cap exercise at 5,000 square foot.
I think it could. It's offering that as an option.
That's
It says or capped at 5,000.
So 5,000 is pretty good size. And we're saying up until 5,000, it's personal service, and then over 5,000 would be commercial recreation.
I'll invite Ms. Eisenberg or Ms. Furstenberg, if you'd like to add. I don't know.
Yes, so the way that staff interprets fitness now, if it's up to 5,000 square feet, they classify it as personal service. If it's over 5,000 feet, as commercial recreation. And Christine can offer a little bit more about what's happening with fitness today, because it is one of the more dynamic retail spaces that she's seeing.
I think fitness, I have a cold, so excuse me for if I'm sounding a little nasally, but fitness is one of the most active categories in retail categories throughout the Bay Area and actually throughout the country right now. And that's a good thing in many ways. That means we're all interested more in fitness. And fitness can be something as small as a bar studio or a sports training facility. And 5,000 square feet is about where these things fall. I think it would be really, you want to look at what is the higher priority, a concern about fitness or a concern about vacancy, because limiting fitness to a great extent, like limiting it under 5,000 square feet, might create more vacancies. So this is a real balance that you need to look at as far as how do we go about it. So Jeannie and I talked about this a lot, and that's where we came up with the 5,000 square foot threshold, is that that's about where most of the personal service fitness classes are. And above that, it does go to more of a commercial recreation where there's, you know, pickleball, all kinds of other new classification of tenants right now. But again, we were hoping to fill some of the vacancy, which seemed to be an issue, and that's why the interim ordinance came up. And when I did a study back in October, Palo Alto overall has if you look at the median size of the vacancy in Palo Alto, it is in that 3,000 to 6,000 square feet, which again, allowing fitness up to 5,000 would help a lot in reducing vacancy.
As I think about, thanks. And as I think about it, I've been talking about these core retail areas, the I'll call it Upper University, and then we have two others that are pedestrian-oriented streets now, the Ramona Street closure and the California Avenue Street closure. Those are areas that we have moved toward really embracing. This is where we want true retail vibrancy. And so I would be open to this, but excluding those core retail areas. And that really applies to some of these other liberalizations as well, where we have one standard for these real vibrant core retail areas, and then we have greater latitude everywhere else.
Yeah. In general, I concur with that. You know, crystal balls are hard to come by. I'd be more willing to be flexible and allow more things. And if we get too many gyms, then we can address it then. I think I would rather have more flexibility. If we're going to err, I would want too much flexibility as opposed to not enough.
Those core areas.
Yeah. To me, having a gym off California or off university is a really good thing. I'm not sure if I really am wild about having a huge gym on the storefront, but
If I may ask for clarification, what is there a street that you use in terms of delineating Upper and Lower University Avenue? Where would you draw that line?
I'm not sure on the fly where that would be, whether that's down to Cowper or where. Alan, I don't know if you had.
Florence, maybe.
Oh, even that far up?
Maybe,
Well,
maybe
so,
that far up.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where, but I think when 525 starts, that's where it stops. And interestingly, I'm not sure that if we hadn't had a monolithic type of structure like 525, that university wouldn't have vibrant retail down that far. Those kinds of developments they bring a lot of workers, but they don't they really harm the street front retail aspects, just to kind of bear that in mind. So it may be contributing to retail vibrancy in the other blocks because of all the workers, but right there it's sort of a dead zone.
And if I may add a little more color from the PTC's discussion, we had considerable interest in having consistency across a wider range of areas. So to the extent that that's possible, we recommend that. It gives people the freedom to decide where to locate without having to deal with too many inconsistencies. And the other is we don't yet understand what the effects of SB 79 are likely to be. But we tried to discuss that to some extent. Would that increase demand for fitness because higher density, less open space? Would that increase demand for traditional retail? If so, by how much? So any consideration you can give to that question would be valuable.
Yeah, I agree with both those points. Okay, so let's go down to the next. It's still on this one. The second bullet, allow office that uses face side and rear yards. Would you be able to accommodate office there? And I think a big yes if it's neighborhood serving office, which is defined in our code. If it's general office, I would not be supportive.
So I agree with that in general. I don't know about in the downtown that's an area where neighborhood serving is what is really evolved in the downtown. Although I will note that this question SB 79, and if we have significantly more housing in the greater downtown area, does that bring us back toward those residents needing walkable or wanting walkable services in the downtown area? Something we've lost over the decades. Originally, that's what the downtown provided more, and then we became a regional destination. But if we have, thousands more people living in the downtown area, then they are seeking walkable services there. But we aren't there yet. That's going to take time, and it will be limited by really the lot sizes, which really prohibit a lot of that SB 79 type development. So in the downtown area, I think of it differently from elsewhere. And I am interested in understanding more what are the realities in the current retail needs for that back office space for inventory and office needs, and how much space is really surplus that would not, if we enacted this, it would not result in a shrinkage of the actual retail floor space. And that's the unintended consequence that I'm concerned with. But I don't know where the right line, where to draw that line. But I'm not ready to embrace this without a better understanding of the ramifications. And I'd be glad to maybe take some tours of some of these downtown establishments and really see what's happening in how those spaces are currently being utilized, and whether this change would mean we effectively shrink retail. The property owner gets to rent ground floor space as more valuable office space, and that the outcome of this is maximizing revenue for the property owner as opposed to really facilitating retail and while recognizing any changes in market realities.
Okay, let's move on to the last bullet there, medical offices. So what this is saying is that medical offices that have 35 square feet of retail are now considered retail.
If I could step in on this one in particular, part of the question here is we've had uses wanting to come into some of these spaces that otherwise would be considered personal service. So they're different kinds of spas, but they're bringing in treatments that involve a medical professional. And because there is a doctor involved, that then bumps them into our medical office requirements, and so therefore are not allowed in these areas. And so the question here, and we're very interested in hearing your input, is to whether there is an interest in allowing some of these types of uses that do involve some medical professionals, but otherwise might be considered a personal service use or retail. And some of the others examples that are listed there, including, if you're selling glasses, but you want to have a doctor there that can do the eye test in the back. Whether that type of use is something that should be allowed if they have at least a certain amount of retail service or personal service.
So what type of uses would these new uses that have a doctor involved? What?
Med spas is kind of the general overarching term.
And what does that mean?
I might actually
You don't go to them?
Apparently not.
I mean, I can provide just some general, but we also have our consultants on here. But I mean, just to kind of make it practical, med spas are things where perhaps you're getting treatments like staff was saying, with needles, right? If you have Botox, that's a med spa. If you do certain lasers for
Cosmetic
anti-aging,
skin
cosmetic
surgery, yeah.
skin,
Right.
estheticians, those kinds of things.
And there are some, I believe, that have machines that'll do a body scan, and you need a technician to interpret the results so that you can then walk out with those results. There are a number of, my understanding is there's a lot of interest in some of these types of services. But when there is a medical professional involved, that's kind of the red line that's been used to distinguish between medical office, because there has been that concern in the past.
So one, I want to make sure we draw a line between allowing it when there's a medical professional involved and then going too far the other direction. So just want to make sure that it's designed in a way that that medical professional is supplementary as opposed to it really being a medical office. And I don't know how to draw that line. And then second, this again, liberalizing that part of retail, I would be open to, except in those core retail areas. Or probably I'd be inclined to not allow it in those core retail areas.
I concur with that. I think Botox on University is a different story than Botox on the cross streets or Botox on Lytton. Yeah. But again, if it looks and feels like retail, then I'm more inclined to let it come in.
All right, committee members, just a quick time check. I believe we've got a hard stop in an hour and we have 2 more items to get through. So if there's a way we could perhaps have committee members identify concerns in the next few slides, or if you don't have any concerns, staff, if there's any ambiguity that you would like further clarity.
Well, and I will point out that there's some overlap between this and the next few pages, since this is focused on California Avenue, but we had some good conversation about University as well.
Okay, so let's move on to the, sorry, this is Cal Ave we're on. Okay, so let's move down to the next one, which is the waivers. And I'm hesitant to make the waivers any easier. I'd rather relax the regulations, liberalize the regulations, and not route people into the waivers. So I would have the second bullet would be my preference.
Noted. Thank you.
Do you concur, Pat?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the next one. Okay, so this is the same song, second verse on this one, I think.
Correct. Some of the other shopping districts. Thank you.
Okay. So, see, we are 10:30. Yeah, so I would make it let's see, so this would be, I would want the first bullet with the same caveats that we had before on this one.
And where do we address the issue that you brought up earlier of, for instance, whether the mini shopping center at Loma Verde and Middlefield that had the fire, there has been, I think we've implied a reassurance to the community that that's gonna return with retail, and if it's not in the retail protection zone, then that goes up in flames.
Although they still could do HIP and get around it even if it had RPO. So
yeah, but it is a question of, are there any areas that we had assumed were in the retail protection zone that are not? So we've had some that probably shouldn't be, and we're addressing those. I hadn't realized that there are some that perhaps should be and weren't included, and I really want to make sure that that's being looked at, and how we might rectify that.
Vice
See,
Chair,
John's got a little input.
yeah, Vice Chair Chang brought this area up specifically, so I think we may have already given some feedback to staff on that.
And just noting for that referenced property, that is governed by a planned community ordinance. That said, there's been a lot of changes relative to state law and the Housing Accountability Act. And if a housing developer were interested in developing that site, it is possible that despite regulations that we have, there may be limits on what we could actually require for retail at that location. This is something that we're actively looking at now to see exactly to what extent the city has the authority to require retail.
And that would supersede a PC.
The potentially.
Okay, thanks. Another thing to share with our legislators.
Okay, so we slide down, keep on, this is again, same thing. So let's go to the top of packet page 22. Okay, so we've already talked about the first one. Let's talk about Midtown and Charleston. Jean, can you talk about Midtown and Charleston here?
Yes, so this is one of the complications where those shopping centers have a base zoning district of CN, neighborhood commercial, which has a use table. Then there's a specific use table to these shopping centers, which lists a set of uses. And then when you get to the GF ground floor combining district, the one we were looking at that includes the combining district for downtown, or excuse me, for University Avenue, that has a separate use table. And that is the use table GF combining district is the use regulations that govern what happens at those two shopping centers. So the other two set of regulations become moot. So we need to streamline in one direction or another to make sure it's clear on which use regulations apply to this location.
From PTC's point of view, as a rule, we hoped for one base district, one overlay. No, nothing more complicated.
And the general feedback was to, look at what would be allowed under each of those different overlays and districts and choose the thing that is most permissive for consideration in the draft ordinance.
And so, but effectively what we're saying is Midtown and Charleston go together now into a single zoning.
There was a table that was also provided for this where you show that you've got so many different overlapping regulations that then supersede each other. So you can go to one and you think you know what's allowed. And then it turns out that no, actually this other one overrides it. And so trying to simplify that so that there's one set of rules, correct?
The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and there's a lot of good intentions in our code. So.
Well, just on that theme, we had speakers who raised a couple of issues on how all these changes that we're doing, what's the impact of them? And so we can have substantive changes, but if the perception among prospective retailers and brokers is that things are still real complicated, or that this is interim or whatever. So I do think that we want to look at the language that we use to really frame these issues in more effective ways. And that, one of the things that wouldn't be in the code, but I've talked about for a while, and I'm sorry, John Late will want to hear this one, which is having a narrative on the improvements we've made in permitting related streamlining, and what we've done and what we're doing and what's on the horizon. And this is something that I've felt is really overdue. And maybe part of that is through our economic development manager, we can work with the planning director and really have a better narrative for our residents and for prospective retailers and brokers, so that they understand that things aren't the way they were 5 or 10 years ago, and they we're on a path to being even better at certain points in the future.
If I can just add from an economic development perspective, we want to be the narrators of our own story. And certainly we're having conversations about these flexible provisions that hopefully will spur more economic development. And so something that we may discuss at the city council retreat on priorities on Saturday could be how we do or how we move forward with some branding and messaging based on what happens here at PCT and at city council. But I think it is important to share with our real estate brokers and development community members the good word and how we're moving forward to ensure that we're being more business friendly and more entrepreneurial. Thank you.
Okay, let's slide down to the parking requirements. And
Keith, maybe to help on attachment B, you can see the 2 bullet points from PTC. So parking regulations, commissioners generally didn't support exempting change of use applications from triggering additional parking requirements, nor being more explicit in the code about the applicability of AB 2097. And commissioners supported updating parking standards and shared parking allowances. And they specifically asked about restaurant parking requirements. So that's where PTC is landing.
yeah, I mean, my thought would be that like downtown, you just have so much parking per square foot, the use doesn't matter. And I think that's simpler. And I would prefer that at other places, is just say, sometimes it's going to be too much, sometimes it's going to be too little, but let's just make it simple so you don't have to change parking every time you change use. Alan, do you want to talk about PTC's thoughts?
Yeah, I think we were receptive to the idea that the standards are too high. And we also wanted to raise the issue that, again, this may be area specific. In Cal Ave, where you have a substantial new garage, you may have a lot more flexibility in reducing standards than you do in, say, along El Camino.
I mean, sometimes this kind of moot point now because of 2097, right? The bulk of downtown, all of Cal Ave, doesn't have parking requirements at all.
I suspect you're going to cover what I was just about to say.
Yes, I was going to say that, correct. That this still comes in, though, with some of our businesses on El Camino Real, for example, where you've got an existing building, an existing parking lot, and there isn't any other space on the parcel, and they want to bring in another use that has a higher parking requirement, and maybe it's only a parking space or two. But because that creates a non-conforming situation or worsens a non-conforming situation, it's something that staff has not been able to allow. And so one option here would be to provide some flexibility to say, as long as it's not an increase of more than a couple of parking spaces, then maybe that change of use is okay in terms of use of an existing building. If that sort of flexibility is desirable. And so we were trying to provide some options to allow new businesses to come in when you're dealing with an existing building that's outside the radius of the train stations.
Okay. Pat, do you have any thought?
Just that it's kind of odd because where we're, I think, seeing the real greater transformation from goods retail to eating and drinking is within the AB 2097
Yes.
zones. So I'm not sure what we'll really face outside of those zones. But I guess I will say, to the extent that it's applicable outside the zones, I'm open to some flexibility.
Okay. The next is mixed use parking requirements. And so that's if you have, would this be adjacent developments that share a lot, or is this for mixed use purposes?
Right, 2 or more uses on the same lot.
Okay. And how would this be implemented? Would this be, we would call it out and say, if you have office, you need this much parking. If you have retail, you have this much office, but if you have mix and match, you can have a lesser amount, or what would be how's that?
Right now, projects are required to demonstrate parking demand. So they need to submit to the city evidence that they don't need the shared parking will work, that the uses have different times of day. But right now it's capped at 30 or 30%. And so the idea is to increase that cap so more of the parking could be shared than 30%.
Okay. Any thoughts? Seems reasonable to me. Okay. Conditional use permits now. Yes, a change of name maybe. So we're on packet page 24 here. I think that's a really good idea. I don't see the downside apart from having to change paperwork. Pat, you concur with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next, move on. Okay,
You know what,
oh, go
Keith,
ahead.
if I may, sorry.
Yeah, jump in.
Here's what I'm struggling with, just in terms of the packet and the timing. I'm feeling like, this item seems to want us to give feedback on every single bullet. And yet, if we do that, we're not going to get through this item. We might complete this item, but we're not going to get to the next 2. So I'm struggling with what degree of feedback staff is looking for today. I know we opened the meeting by saying these are urgent items, and that's why number 4 doesn't have to be looked at today. But if we could just get some clarity from staff with how can we be most helpful with the time remaining and the number of items remaining, that would give me a little bit more comfort here, because I'm just getting worried that we're running out of time.
If I mind, I concur that we have a problem. Part of the problem is, when was the last time we had a retail committee?
November.
So it's really a question of we're trying to cram in a bunch of really important stuff in one meeting, and it seems clear that we need more meetings, and maybe not a bunch more, but
well, for this item, we only have 3 more items left to discuss, and then we can go on to
So committee members, just to respond to Councilmember Lithcott-Hames' point, attachment B is really the PTC's feedback on all of these detail tables. And so I think as we started this out, the question is, do we agree with it? Thumbs up, thumbs down, go harder, go more restrictive, go less restrictive, which we've gotten there. But if you wanted to zero in, you could look at the zoning map, the permitted uses on that summary table or the summary bullets.
And in addition, I would say that we really have covered most of the topics in the discussion for this item. I think the one exception is the retail preservation ordinance is not something that we've discussed.
Correct.
Well, and if I could jump in.
Oh, hi, Ed.
Hello, my apologies for interrupting, but not on this point. I do think it's really important to focus or acknowledge that this item will come back to the city council. And so in particular, we want to ensure that the feedback provided to the PTC helps ensure alignment between what the PTC is doing and their recommendations and what the council will see. Ultimately, you and your committee and your colleagues will have the opportunity to go through these very specifically when it comes back for action. So it's really general feedback, and in fact, to reflect the perspective, if you can channel your colleagues as well, such that the PTC's work is focused in the right areas. I do think that's general feedback and does not need to be as specific.
Well, and kind of on two related points. One is that I think to the extent we can provide that alignment between our recommendations to this committee and PTC, that makes that council discussion much more productive. That ideally we don't have a council discussion that is going into every minute detail, because we've already provided a kind of a consensus between PTC and this committee. So fleshing it out here, I think, has a real value. So I think that's something to just bear in mind. Oh, and I will add John Schenk's point that getting this across the goal line is important. And I don't want to see it get to the council and they punt back because there wasn't enough time, or they disagreed fundamentally because of those things. So yeah, we can argue that, yeah, it'll go to the council, but I'm not sure having it go to the council less well baked is going to move the ball forward.
No, I really don't want churn, and that's why I really think we want to go through each of these. But I think we're down the home stretch. Let's get down to the RPO, which is going to be the only really sticking point here. And do we want to have modifications? And one of the things that came up with the PTC was like, well, right now we do it a parcel by parcel. If it had retail, we rehab it. Next door to it, if it wasn't retail, it's not mandatory. And I could see reshaping that and say we want it more area based as opposed to parcel based. But that said, I think the RPO is not our problem right now. I think if you look at our rental rates downtown, certainly the fact that we're 50% higher than our neighbors means that there is demand here and as I don't think by repealing the RPO, we would have less retail downtown, which means that the rates would go even higher. So I don't think that repealing the RPO would be a good thing.
Yeah, I'd say mend it, don't throw it out.
Yeah. So I could see some changes to it. I don't think it necessarily is infallible, but I think the spirit of it is needed right now. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And for example, the 1-to-1, I think we want to keep it 1-to-1. Okay. Planned use, planned communities. Edgewood was the example they used at PTC. They had certain uses in those stores, and if you want to change those uses, you'd have to either form a new PC or allow Jonathan to wave his magic wand and say, yeah, you can change it to somewhat similar. And to me, as long as it's the look and feels the same, I have no problem with it. Pat, do you have any thoughts?
I concur.
Okay. Okay, and so this last one, the zoning map. I don't think there's any input we need here.
No, this one's fine.
Yeah, we want to simplify. Yeah, having overlays on top of overlays, I don't think is a good idea. Okay. So I think that wraps it up. Do you need any more input from us?
No, thank you.
Okay. Okay, that took a while, but I think we made progress. So let's move on to the next one, which is going to be the retail nodes.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know, Alex, whether you wanted to start with anything on this one or?
Thank you. I was just going to remind the retail committee that this agenda item before you all this morning is really a consideration to recommend to the city council a resolution amending the El Camino Real retail node map. And there's 3 specific geographic areas that will be presented now. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Armour, Assistant Director, Planning and Development Services again. And next slide. Just to quickly remind you that the origin of this effort is one of the housing element programs, 3.4C, and that there is this particular part of it that talks about as we were reducing the impact of the retail preservation ordinance on potential housing to reduce the constraints on housing. We wanted to have strategic locations on El Camino Real that retained the full protections of the retail preservation ordinance. And so next slide, this was an item that came to council in March of last year. And as part of the approval of an ordinance at that time, there was direction to return to Planning and Transportation Commission to focus in the areas that would be protected with this retail node map. Next slide is the map that was adopted at that meeting, which included the nodes that were recommended by the Planning and Transportation Commission, but also retained the preservation protections basically for the entire area from Page Mill all the way to the southern border, just in the interim, as the Planning Commission then had time to take a deeper dive. So next slide. The Planning and Transportation Commission met 3 times, March, April, and May, and went into some depth. Each of these was multi-hour discussions and really getting into the details. Their recommendation focused on a number of different elements they identified. They were recommending a reduction in the complexity where we had overlapping rules. For example, NVCAP area already has strong protections and direction for retail, and areas where there is no applicability. So our planned community zones, or if there's no existing retail, or also the retail preservation impacts on future housing sites. So housing element sites, for example, the retail preservation ordinance wouldn't apply if they wanted to develop 100% housing. And so then focusing on areas that were particularly valuable as retail. So for example, retaining student serving retail along the West Charleston Arrestradero intersection for the kids who are walking and biking to school. And so then one final slide before we get to the maps that were recommended by PTC. The next slide, please. The recommendation focused in on 3 nodes, and a portion of the El Camino Real that was referred to as the central node, an area referred to as the triangle node, and then a new kind of bike to school node that incorporates that intersection previously referenced. Next slide. The overall map is on this next page, and then the next slide zooms in a little bit more to show you what those 3 nodes are and where they are located. Again, we have Chair Aiken from the Planning and Transportation Commission available if you have questions about the PTC discussion and recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any clarification or questions, Pat? And okay, so let's go to public comment.
There are no requests to speak for item 2.
Alan, do you have any comments that you want to give?
Yeah, there are not very many specifics here. So the general comments are just, as Eddie Armour said, we're looking for the best places to apply RPO. Other sites were already appropriately zoned, we felt, or were PCs, or were not ideal for local retail. So that's the general concept behind the elimination of the California Avenue node and the NVCAP node that we had previously. The central nodes expanded in some respects and contracted in others. I won't get into the details of that now. The big open issue, which staff will be investigating in the future, is the interaction between state law, the housing element, and the node definitions. Because I'm going to try to express this and hopefully I get it right. But for opportunity sites that have been identified as yielding BMR units, state law requires us to allow 100% residential development there. For administrative simplicity, we have extended that concept to some other sites to which it might not necessarily apply. It's worth doing some research to see whether we should revisit that. I think those are the essential general points.
And if I may, one additional clarification, these nodes are not the only area where the retail preservation ordinance applies. It's just that based on the revised retail preservation ordinance, these are the areas where the full one-to-one replacement, along with a couple of our overlay areas, ground floor and pedestrian.
Yeah, understood. So I have a question about the housing element, and we used a single bucket as opposed to having two buckets of parcels. How feasible would it be to have our opportunity list site divided into those two buckets?
If I could restate the question to make sure I'm understanding, your question is whether this allowance for 100% housing could be applied just to those that are listed as having a certain amount of low affordability.
Yep.
Rather than any parcel that is included on the list. I think that's something that we could look into with the city attorney's office as.
Okay, that'd be useful. I mean, one of the concerns I have is that the number of units that we gain in this area is pretty small, but the impact to retail could be quite large. And I don't want to blindly say that, oh, all these housing element sites can't have retail in them, or we can't require RPO. I want to make sure that we make a wise decision. Pat, do you have thoughts?
I share that concern, and so to the extent that we can continue to not only create these nodes but make sure that they're not eliminated by facts on the ground and new development, I think is really important. I did have a question too on this third one, a bike to school node. That's primarily the automobile dealership area, right?
Yeah.
How do we come up with this name? I understand it is, the others are descriptive of the areas. This is a description of what passes through there. So I don't get that.
I will have to speak for other commissioners in this. This was not my idea, but as I understand it, the original definition of the automobile dealership node excluded particularly the Walgreens, which is immediately nearby, but also some other sites that were heavily used by student traffic. And the feeling was that retail protection was particularly important for that audience. And so new areas were included and the name was changed.
All right, get the concept. Might want to look at the name again.
Definitely no objection from the PTC.
Julie, do you have any comments on this? No. Okay. So Ellen, was there any talk on the PTC about mandating ground floor retail in this area?
I don't recall that we ever considered mandating it. There were too many opportunity sites that we thought would be good, would have good potential for development. A number of them, particularly in the subnode A area, which, as I recall, is more on the northern and western end, looked like the sites were sufficient size and depth that they could be good mixed use opportunities. But no, I don't recall that we ever considered strictly mandating it for the entire area.
And just as Director Lade talked about earlier, is that a legal question on whether we could do that? I would say to the extent that we are legally authorized to include at least replacement of ground floor retail where it exists, and we allow for high density housing, that high density housing would replace existing amounts of ground floor retail would be a desired outcome in most circumstances. There might be places where we say that's not appropriate or necessary. But I think that's an important component dependent on what latitude we have, and then within that latitude, what policy decision we want to make. But what I'd like to see is that we basically are replacing the bulk of our ground floor retail in these areas as we enable high density housing.
Yeah, so I see two options. One is to, for a subset of this, have effectively a ground floor overlay. And the other would be to remove the opportunity sites that are large, or probably that are small, from the either by having two buckets, or have remove some opportunity sites and replace them with things in the buffer to ensure that we have critical mass of retail. I am really concerned that we lose enough retail that we lose the recipe, and the other retail will become less feasible, and we'll end up with very little retail.
And in this area in particular, the lower lease costs mean that certain kinds of retail are viable now, that even if we replaced the floor area, that same kind of retail might not be viable.
Yeah. I just, on that same theme, we've for years have said, oh, well, this El Camino area isn't really a great vibrant retail area. And it has been more of a car destination retail than our other retail areas. But for the reasons that Alan just cited, it has been our most affordable retail. And you get retail functions there that can't afford to be elsewhere in our city. And yet the occupancy has been high in general. So I think we would just want to bear that in mind, that we don't measure retail vibrancy necessarily by the demand, by high revenue generating retail that can pay top dollar for space. If we're really trying to have retail services throughout the city, this is an area that we have those services that can't afford high rents. The rare thing in Palo Alto.
A question for Alan. The central node is quite long. Was there any consideration of trimming that down or breaking that up into two?
The original proposal that came to the PTC had it broken up into three. Let me see what my notes are on this. We eventually decided to consolidate it into one, and the rationale was that a certain subpart of that area was the one I already mentioned, where mixed use looked viable, so that could be included. We felt that the existing retail was really thriving, and we wanted to preserve as much of that, particularly the affordable retail we've been discussing, as we could. There is substantial pedestrian traffic there, which leads to the third point, that there is a general support for symmetry across El Camino. So those crossings are heavily used today to connect retail of different types on both sides of El Camino. And when you combine those things, you find that while you could develop smaller nodes, subnodes, the gaps between them are very small. So it's not clear that there's a win.
So Pat, what do you think is the best path forward here? Do we try to mean, overall, I think I like this concept. Do we try to trim out some of the housing element sites so we have more RPO here?
By trim them out, what do you mean?
Remove them as opportunity sites and replace them with something in the buffer.
Oh, well, you're right. That goes into the issue of whether we would have the latitude with what SB 79 is mandating to relocate some of our housing opportunity sites more toward the downtown, greater downtown areas, and we haven't begun that process. But how we align this consideration with that is something that's important, and we can't do it this meeting. So conceptually, I'd be interested in whether there are some of these sites that we might want to remove as housing opportunity and replace them, and in some cases, maybe replace them 2-to-1 with housing opportunity sites in our greater downtown areas so that we'd actually have more housing opportunity sites than we have currently, and not necessarily drive so much of that housing on in this zone.
Through the chair, given the time limitations for today, I want to share that there actually will be a discussion in this coming year about additional housing opportunity sites to avoid no net loss for our RENA compliance. And so it could be that that's a better time to then expand into this discussion, so that then the recommendation today really can just be on, is this the right area for these higher protections along El Camino in terms of the vision for El Camino going forward?
Yeah, so I think it's the right area, and to acknowledge that we are interested in exploring some of those adjustments subsequently.
I concur.
So then this is one where we would like to do a motion, because if it is unanimous, we can put it on consent with the full council.
Okay, Julie, do you have any thoughts?
She gave a
She gave
thumbs
a
up.
thumbs
Oh, thumbs up. Okay.
So
Okay.
if we do that,
Hmm.
how are we still allowing for this future adjustment or latitude?
So what we've heard is an interest in considering those housing element sites there and an interest in having retail in this area as indicated by the map. And so that'll be a factor that we look at as we are looking at new housing element sites and whether there is flexibility with that. I think staff has received that direction. And so the motion here would just be on, is this the appropriate node?
Okay, so it wouldn't.
I believe right now the node is the entire, so there's a node in the code right now. It has the whole El Camino. We're just trimming it down a bit. But apart from that, we're not changing any of the rules.
And by trimming it down, we're not in some way precluding some of these subsequent changes, right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks. So I will move that, what is it that we,
You can say the staff motion, the recommendation in the packet.
okay,
Okay. I'll second that. We have to have voice vote too, don't, because remote, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Councilmember Lithcott Hames,
Yes.
Councilmember Burt,
Yes.
Chair Rectal,
Yes.
motion carries 3 yeses.
Okay.
Nice work, guys. One more. I think Alex will intro it. It is a referral follow-up from a prior discussion we had at an earlier retail committee. So Alex.
Thank you. I think we decided we would go till about 11:30. So quick time check. It's about 20 minutes. We have about 20 minutes for this item. And the purpose of this agenda item is to update the retail committee on permitting, specifically focused on operational staffing and technology improvements. And I think you will certainly appreciate the update and the data that's being shared. Things are certainly moving along.
We have Director Late here, as well as our Chief Building Official, George Hoyt, as well as Sarah McRee, Division Manager in the team. This is not an action item, so it's open for discussion. John?
Great, thank you. So yeah, we can go to the next slide. This is just the purpose of this is to respond to the retail committee's request last year to provide an update on some permitting and improvements that are being made to the development center in our permitting process. Today, we'll talk about some of the changes that we've made and some metrics that we've collected over time. Next slide, please. Over the past several years, we've really been focusing in on three general topic areas related to really people, process, and technology. More recently, we've been spending more focus on customer service and our engagement with our constituents and really shifting from a transactional sort of hands-off approach to something more of a partnership where we're helping people achieve their interest while still advancing the city's interests in policy initiatives. Next slide, please. Just to hit on the staffing component, I'll just flag that we've over the last several years, we have transitioned from a half staff, half consultant based inspection program to a fully in-house inspection program. This is an area where we did previously receive a lot of complaints historically, and it's frankly really turned around and is one of the bright spots in our department where we get a lot of positive feedback from our inspection group. Credit to George and to the leadership in that area for really turning the inspection program around. We've also implemented a number of mandatory customer service trainings. We've had a few of those, and we are continuing to focus in on how we engage with our customers with our staff. And we're currently looking at the interface between our customers and staff. A key touch point is with our project coordinators. We're looking at that job series now and at opportunities to reach closer to the ideas of the blueprint that was established quite some time ago to see if we can better realize those goals. Next slide, please. On the technology side, we made a number of improvements. I'll just highlight a couple of the more notable ones. We've reduced a cumbersome submittal checklist from 15 pages to 2 to really focus in on what we need so we can be more efficient in what we're, one, asking of our applicants, but also what staff is spending time reviewing. Critically, I think, to our operation, we've expanded our instant permits. We'll spend a little bit more time talking about that, and we have more interest in continuing that initiative. We've conducted a number of pilot programs to sort of test ideas that we have about the permitting process and how customers want to engage with our operation, especially in this environment where technology and remote activity seems to be a preference with many of our customers. So how do we leverage sort of the benefits of that without losing the customer service and efficiency with those programs? And then important, I think, to the community and to this committee in particular, there's been a greater connection between the Planning and Development Services Department and Economic Development. We have regular meetings. We are engaged with and talk about new tenants that are coming in and collaboratively working to solve problems before they begin through constant dialogue with applicants. And I think we've had a lot of great success in that area. I want to credit Ruth and now Alex joining the team too for efforts in that area. Next slide, please. Okay, customer satisfaction. So this is an area where the council has in the past asked for some metrics to test, and we've been collecting this data, as you can see from this chart, for quite a while. We didn't want to. We wanted to establish some historical information before we publish this information, but as you can see, where we stand now, 85% of the folks that have responded to our surveys find our service to be good or excellent. We're not perfect. We're human, and we're going to make mistakes, and things are going to get bogged down every now and again. But on balance, we're doing a pretty good job, at least from those who are participating in the survey. And you can see year over year, we've had some. We continue to increase in receiving that feedback. We have opportunities for folks that are engaging at the counter to use their QR code to provide feedback on the spot, or take that image and take it with them. We have our inspectors who are giving out cards, feedback cards, at every inspection that they go to. And we specifically encourage our staff, whenever you have a unpleasant or interaction, to hand out that card and to get that feedback, because that's where we're going to get the learning opportunity. And we've tried to create a safe space for our staff to say, hey, listen, we want to, we want the feedback. We understand there may be some personal sort of comments. We want to look to what the problem is in the system issue to see how we can improve this. And so we've really tried to create that opportunity for our staff. And we also send out emails when a building permit is issued after the process to see what that experience is like. Next slide, please.
We're still seeing roughly 10%, or have you dug into that and understand, were they kind of one-offs, or was there some process? Oh, sorry.
The question was, are we diving into the 10%? We absolutely are. And we're finding that it is a combination of these sort of topic areas that we have. Sometimes it's really just a staff interaction issue. Somebody wasn't perceived as being professional or timely or something like that. And so we've got a whole bunch of resources that are dedicated to how we improve those resources. Some of them are just process, like, why do I have to go through this? It took me so long to, schedule this thing, or I get these returns. And so I think we're always going to have an element of that.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're finding is that the vast majority of our engagement is really quite good. And yes, we'll continue to look at these numbers and look at those specific issues to see if we can solve them. I'll note, George, Sarah, and I, and a couple of others meet every other week, and this is an area that we are looking at on every time we meet, to understand what is the praise that we receive, but what is the feedback that we've also received, and how are we addressing that? If it's an individual, how are we going to address it at the individual? If it's a process issue, how are we going to address it at that process issue? So This is an active part of our work.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Next slide, please.
Could I ask a brief question, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Late. I commend you for doing this. It's great that you're seeking this information and getting these results. My question is why the 2022 column is even included. It comes with a big fat footnote that says of the 154 responses, 88% were generated for the building inspection program automated email over 1 month. So it doesn't seem to fit. And I think it's problematic that it's here, because your eye sees better numbers there. And it looks, therefore, if someone's just taking a glance, it looks as if we really dived in 23, 24, and 25. We still are not at the excellent numbers, or the excellent plus good from that 2024. So I just would recommend Xing that column out unless there's a reason why you think it is somehow comparative and belongs here.
Thank you for that question. So we're all about transparency, and it's data that we had, and so we wanted to show it. But you're absolutely right. It is not a comparative data point. Most of this information was collected in 1 month, and mostly from our inspection program. So to that extent, I think it's helpful for them. But I'll also note that there's an element of, part of building this out over time is we want to make sure that there's less opportunities for bias in the respondents, so that somebody, when an inspector hands a card for a survey, we don't want somebody to respond, well, I better do a positive response because the survey, this inspector is going to come back to my project site and I don't want to create any problems. And so the way we've addressed that is the way that we frame the questions. They're completely anonymous. We have no way of understanding where it's coming from. And we leave the option available to the person who's writing the feedback for them to provide their contact information for us if they want to be engaged and have a conversation. But otherwise, it's completely anonymous. But back to the question, you're right. We could easily strip that, and with that comment, perhaps we do going forward, and really just focus in on the more comparable numbers.
Well, and if you'll skip to the next slide, which you're heading to, that reinforces this, because when we look at actual response times, we see all this improvement. And 2022 had far worse permit approval time and first response times than we have today. It doesn't make a lot of sense what that previous slide showed on 2022. So I think continuing to not hide that, but I think it does look like it's just anomalous data that isn't really reflecting the reality.
Great. And then I'll pick up on the slide then and just note that we do have a number of areas of improvement that we have been tracking. You can see that on the slide, and this is really credited to certainly the work that the department's been doing, but also the city council's involvement in many years ago looking at wages, support from the city manager and other departments that are engaged in the development review process. This is really a culmination of all those collective efforts and energies focused on, again, sort of the people, the process, and the technology to make the changes so that we can achieve these results. And we're still looking to do better as we go forward. At some point, we're going to level out, perhaps, but I don't think we're there yet. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is this is an area where, again, I think there's great opportunity for us to continue to expand instant permits. The more that we can do to get out of the permitting process and let contractors, homeowners, builders obtain their permit electronically and without having to engage with us, that's going to be the most efficient and timely way of promoting that opportunity. And you can see here over time, we've continued to expand the number of permits that are available, and the number of folks that are taking advantage of that is also increasing. We hope to, if we can go to the next slide, expand our instant permitting to owner builders now, and also take the heat pump permit that is currently limited to single family residences to expand that to multifamily. We'll continue to focus on other technological improvements. We're actively looking at refining our staffing models and are singularly focused in on that customer service experience and the touch points that we have with our customers. Again, we're not perfect and we're not, where we want to be yet, but we've made some great strides and really, I think as a department, quite proud of the progress that we've made. And with that, I'll end the presentation. Thank you.
Can you go back to the previous slide there where you have the instant permits? What's the green and what's the black?
Sarah McCree, Senior Operations Manager. The green is just highlighting the 3 new instant permits that we added in the last 3 years.
Okay, so all the black was already existing and we've added those.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You said in the last year?
Over the last 3 years. So
3 years.
yeah.
So the Solar App Plus, I thought that was more recent.
It was within that 3-year period. We should have highlighted that as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Are there any public comments?
Yes, we do have one request to speak.
Thank you very much. John Shank with Thwaites Brothers again. I just wanted to pipe in that over time, I often end up wearing the hat of a tenant who's is frustrated or is nervous about approaching or anything else. And the changes are palpable. Nobody's perfect, but I think moving Jody, getting down into granularity, a plant over there to be accessible by a tenant, by an architect in a moment is really helpful. George is wonderful. He's accessible to the degree he can be, given his schedule to try to help and answer questions. The only thing I want to say, given I've got 3 council members here, is this is sort of the tip of the spear in this part of your management, right? People come to the counter, many residents, right? You feel desperate. It's expensive, time. Oh, I need this, I need that. And the changes are great, but because we can't duplicate these folks, they also are beholden to council priorities for aspirational things, bigger changes, bigger things. And then it's just, there's not enough time, I'm perceiving, to come back and really further improve on these things, add more, do more that's really client facing. And I would encourage, however it comes out as you redo priorities and things, when it comes to Jonathan and the whole pie chart below him, really be super clear on these are our priorities. Well, this is a priority. My ask is make this a priority that's equal to a few of these others so that it doesn't come in after all the time that gets allocated to some of these myriad other things that fall in his camp. Anyway, that's it. But it's gotten so much better. And I have a great confidence when I send somebody over to just go meet with them. It's okay. Go talk, go to the counter. And it's productive and positive. So just want to say a thank you, and it's definitely getting better.
That concludes public comment on item 3.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, since I got drop dead, let me just first commend all the progress. On one of the things I wasn't clear on, maybe it was there, is next steps. What are the planned next things that we intend to do? Is that laid out there?
Yeah, it's in our report, but I'm going to ask Sarah McCree if she can just summarize. And noting the time and the 11:30 deadline, just quickly touch on, the people, process and technology.
So in the upcoming calendar year, we're really focused in on the technology piece. We are in a request for proposal process for our land use management system, which is Acela. Once we're done with that, we're really looking into investing in customer facing build outs like the permit cost calculator and permit wizard that we wanted to pursue this year. But it was recommended that we go through another request for proposal. And so we're going through that process now. We're hoping once we're done with that, we can really pursue those projects. John touched upon this, which is expanding on our instant permits. That's going to be a huge investment in terms of time from all of our staff to expand them to owner builders. One of the barriers to that is that owner builders aren't familiar with our code. And so we want to make sure we have the correct internal controls in place where someone doesn't go through the process, go through an inspection and find out that they have to redo a bunch of work. And I guess the last thing I will highlight is we're really looking at our project coordinator series. That is an area where we're really trying to understand how we can optimize appointments and other types of interactions where the project coordinators are going to be your first point of contact when you come to the DC, when you call us, when you want to meet with us, so that you have someone who is really technically versed in all the work that we do.
And not just first point, but will there be hand-holding throughout?
That is the intention.
Okay.
And that's how we envision their role, is to help shepherd the application through and connect you with the other departments.
And then you've accomplished all this with the resources we have. Are you resource constrained to be able to do these next things?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of your question.
Do you have the resources to be able to do these next steps?
We are. We are set. We're making a few interior changes, but we're good.
So, hearing from John Schenk is a good example of that the word's getting out within the existing community. But I would say we have several audiences. We have our existing both residents and businesses as they go through processes. We have and then we have prospective ones who and we need communication mechanisms that take this, and it's not sort of a tree falling in the forest and a big tree that fell and still nobody heard it. So we have to figure out how we actually communicate this to all the brokers, to prospective retailers. So there'd be one narrative to them. There'd be a different narrative to our community and our residents, who also are probably even lagging more in terms of understanding the changes that are occurring. And so that's they're gonna look at it in a different way. First, a different set of improvements for residential improvements and things, but it's also a different depth of a technical attention And so we need different narratives. The good news is that we can feed, outlines and drafts and the substance into AI tools and ask them to develop drafts of different narratives in split seconds for different audiences of different lengths, and then come back and tweak them. But as somebody who always struggled with first drafts, and I kind of think this has been part of our problem is say, oh God, it's so hard to write this. And I'm going, not anymore. The first draft is a split second these days. So I have to apologize. I got to jump off.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, and we will lose quorum, so.
Oh, anyway, I think we've finished this item. I'm happy. Good work. And it's really important to learn from your mistakes. And admitting mistakes is a really important thing, and fixing them. So.
Okay.
Okay.
I think then we're adjourned.
Okay, then we are adjourned. Okay.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Chair.